Everybody, this is Dream, and we have a nice slate here for NFL on Sunday. This is the main slate on FanDuel. Let's go ahead and get into the quarterbacks. Before I do that, can you please smash that like and subscribe button? Really does help the channel a lot. With that said, let's get into the players themselves. So the top option for quarterbacks is Lamar Jackson here. He's been pretty solid so far this season. He's not been quite as good the last couple weeks, but yeah, I still think he's in a nice little plus matchup here against Cleveland, which he should be able to do pretty well against. Then we're going to look at Geno Smith for Seattle against the Chargers. He's in a pretty good spot here. He's been pretty consistent most of the season, with the exception of week 2. He has some opportunity in this game to have a really solid outing. Seattle wide receivers also look pretty good in this particular matchup. Then we're going to look at Derek Carr for Las Vegas. This should be a game where he should throw the ball a lot. And I kind of expect this game to be a bit of a shootout. Neither team is very good defensively, so I like them to potentially have a really solid game here, and he should be able to get around 20 or so fantasy points. Joe Burrow looks really good here against Atlanta. Really good matchup for him. Great pass defense, or terrible pass defense for him to go against. He had a really big game last week against New Orleans, and I expect him to continue to have big games. And then finally, Dak Prescott for Dallas. He's in a great spot here, coming back from injury, and he's got a nice opportunity here against Detroit to have a good game. A lot of good options at wide receiver for him as well, so I look for him to have a breakout game. At running back, we have Joe Mixon for Cincinnati. He looks like he's poised to have a really solid game here against the Falcons, even though that they are pretty good against the run. It really hasn't hurt him too much the last few weeks. He's been getting 10 to 15 fantasy points, and his price is pretty decent on this particular matchup. Josh Jacobs looks pretty good here for Las Vegas against Houston. His price is pretty high, but he has opportunity here to have a really big game, and so I look for him to potentially do that. Kenneth Walker looks really solid for Seattle against the Chargers. He should be the lead back here, and he should be able to get 15 to 20 fantasy points in this matchup. He's been good the last few weeks. Jonathan Taylor for Indianapolis, he is now their lead back. He looks like he's going to be the favorite play here on this particular slate. He should get 20 or so rushes, and he should have a pretty solid opportunity to have a big game. Despite the fact he didn't do good last week, he should be able to bounce back this week. Damian Pierce, there he is. For Houston, he looks like he's poised to have a pretty solid game here against Las Vegas. He's been good the last 3 weeks as the lead back, and I look for him to continue that. His price point isn't super ideal here, though. Fournette for Tampa Bay, his price point is pretty high, but he also has potential to have really big games. He's been really great the last 3 weeks, and I look for him to continue that. He's going to be a focal point of their offense. Saquon Barkley has priced up quite a bit, but he's still been really solid this season, and I look for him to have another good outing in this matchup. However, we do need him to have a bigger game, but he has the capability against this matchup. Austin Eckler looks like he's due to have a really good game here against Seattle, who's not been good against the rush. He's had some really big games lately, and I look for him to have another one. And then finally, Derrick Henry, another guy that's pretty expensive, but he is in a good spot here against Indiana, and he's been pretty consistent the last 3 weeks with 4 touchdowns in those games. At wide receiver, one of my favorite plays is Deebo Samuel for San Francisco against Kansas City. Kansas City defense against the pass is pretty weak, and he's been pretty consistent this season. The only real risk with him is him getting the catches. CeeDee Lamb is another good spot for Dallas against a terrible Lions defense. He should be able to have a breakout game with his first full game with Dak back. DK Metcalf for Seattle looks pretty good here. Another guy that I do like for Seattle. He's been a little bit inconsistent this season, but he is a pretty safe play based on his price. Brandon Cooks looks like he's in a pretty good spot here against the Raiders, who are not good against the pass. He does have boomer bust mentality, though, so do be aware of that. Jamar Chase looks really good for Cincinnati in this matchup against, who's he playing? The Falcons. He has, they are really bad against the pass, and him and Joe Burrow are playing very well. Then we're going to look at Tyler Lockett for Seattle. Now, if he does play, he's still questionable, but if he does play, which it looks like he will, he should be a guy that will get a lot of targets in this particular game. Drake London, he's been a little bit boomer bust so far this season, but I think he's in a good spot, a cheap price, and he'll have an opportunity to score a touchdown in this one. Mike Williams looks really good for the Chargers against Seattle. Even though Seattle's a little bit tougher against their pass, he's still been pretty solid. Even though he's been a little bit boomer bust, he has opportunity in this game to have a good, solid game. T. Higgins is a guy I really like here for Cincinnati against Atlanta's terrible defense. He is a little bit boomer bust, but he's got a nice opportunity here to have a big game, and he's playing really well. Josh Palmer is now out. Robert Woods, he's an interesting spot for Tennessee, even though it's a little bit of a tough defensive position for him. He has been pretty good in 2 of the last 4 weeks, and I look for him to have an opportunity in this one at a minimum price. And then Amon Ross St. Brown, where are you at? For Detroit, he's one of the few guys on their team that are really good. And while he got hurt, and so that's why his numbers have been a little bit lower. He is the focal point. Will get a lot of targets regardless of who they play, and his price point isn't too terrible for the particular matchup. At tight end, the top overall option is Mark Andrews. Now he is questionable, so you do have to be concerned about that. But if he does play, he will have the opportunity to score 20 plus fantasy points. Travis Kelce is in a really good spot here for Kansas City. Not super ideal because of the tough defense that they're playing against, but that could actually come to his advantage where he'll get a lot of check down opportunities. George Kittle is in a good spot here for San Francisco against Kansas City's defense, who's not good against the pass. And I will look for him to have a breakout game for the season. Hopefully get his first touchdown. Kyle Pitts looks like a good option here against Cincinnati. He's been pretty inconsistent this season, but if he can score a touchdown, he'll pay off. And then TJ Hawkinson for Detroit, even though he's against a tough defense in Dallas, he's been pretty good, and he's had some big games this season, so it looks like if he can score a touchdown, he'll definitely pay off here. My top defenses are the Buccaneers, who play Carolina, who's absolutely terrible, and they just traded away their best player. Then the Packers, who have had some ups and downs this season, but they get a nice game here against Washington. And then the Broncos, who are just a really solid defensive team, they're going up against the average Jets team. And then finally the Raiders, who are going against Houston, that don't have a lot of good options on Houston, but if the Raiders can keep the games short and force some turnovers, they will pay off for you. So overall, it's a pretty good slate. Not my favorite slate of this season, but it's a pretty good one regardless. I think the scoring will be pretty good. And so if you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below. Thank you guys for liking, commenting, and subscribing, and have a nice day, guys.